For people who don't know what DevOps is, can you please define it, and how does it change the relationship between development and operations?
Sure. DevOps, as the name implies, we're concatenating two parts of an organization together, typically within IT. You have development on one hand, you have operations on the other. And DevOps came out of a movement, a management philosophy, and how you new approach to how you innovate within an organization is particularly done within IT. So we're basically merging development and operations together, who traditionally have been separate teams. And if you go through the application lifecycle, how you build and design applications, you typically have a business hypothesis. And that business hypothesis gets encoded within software, source code as we call it, and developers do that type of work. And then when the developer has written the source code, we all know that there's bugs in source and software. And that goes through a whole life cycle. It goes from typically user testing to integration testing to user acceptance testing to pre-production and then eventually into production, where the actual software actually delivers value for the organization. And that whole thing is called the application lifecycle. Traditionally, we looked at development and operations as two different things. Developers were focused on writing source code, and they would hand off to an operations department to test it, to validate it, go back to development if there's an issue, and then run it through the course to production, through all the testing work centers that I just mentioned. So DevOps is a whole new management philosophy, a whole new philosophy how we organize ourselves, how we build an organization for innovation, going from typically large organizations to smaller teams or networks of teams. You're typically blending developers with operations people into one team and making a shared accountability from building the source code to actually getting it to production and making a value to the organization. It also touches on things like the process of how we actually look at work and how we do work on a daily basis. It talks to different types of tooling that we use, and a high emphasis on using automation and automated testing so that developers can actually write the software and it will automatically go through all those life cycle stages to production on its own through an automated testing program. And if you strip it really down, DevOps is kind of like this rebellion against the old adage of having a very structured organization and allowing developers and operations and removing the barriers that we create within our organizational structure and working together to actually contribute value to the organization on a daily basis. You get this feeling when you go to DevOps conferences that there's people that really want to share and they want to collaborate and they want to break down any organizational barriers that may exist in the market. Now, DevOps came from sort of multiple movements. It came from the lean manufacturing movement in the automotive industry from the 70s and early 80s, and particularly the Toyota Kata, as it's called, the sort of lean principles of how you go through an assembly line and think of development through operations through to production as an assembly line that basically came out of the Industrial Revolution. So if you look at that as an assembly line, what we're doing within DevOps is changing the way we work within that assembly line to produce better, more frequent outcomes that are predictable in nature and of higher quality. We've actually blended the lean manufacturing principles also with Agile software development, which came out in the early 2000s. If you look at the Agile Manifesto, it came out in 2003. Those are the founding principles of looking at very lean ways of building software development. And DevOps has become that sort of natural extension to this whole Agile software development movement that happened in conjunction with other lean manufacturing movements of the 70s and 80s.
Thank you.